Well, welcome everyone. I'm County Executive Joe Parisi. With me today, we have some students from local high schools. We have educators. Speaking with me today will be MMSD School Superintendent Jen Cheatham, State Representative Chris Taylor, and Madison School Board President James Howard. Also with me today from the county is Supervisor Jamie Kuhn. Jen will introduce board members. Chris will introduce folks from the legislature who are here with us today. A little over a week ago, we launched a petition urging Governor Walker and Speaker Ryan to enact immediately to address gun violence, to enact reasonable gun laws, including universal background checks, a bump stock ban, a ban on people with domestic violence orders against them from purchasing guns. Since that time, about 5,000 people have logged on to sign the petition. And we've heard from people across the community, across the state, and across the nation that they want their state legislatures and they want Congress to act and act now to address gun violence. Since the shooting, Congress has done nothing. The governor and the state legislature have done nothing toward enacting reasonable gun legislation. The legislature was in session last week. Nothing. Congress is back in session this week. The governor said that this was a federal issue. This is a federal issue. It is also a state issue. And I would ask that if this is not a state issue, why has the NRA spent about $3.5 million in support of Governor Walker? The legislators with me today have bills that are ready to be voted on, bills that have been introduced that could help us lead the way to enacting reasonable gun legislation. On the federal level, Speaker Ryan said it's too early when asked initially about doing something about reasonable gun laws. As one of the students from Florida said, no, it's too late. Governor Walker and Speaker Ryan are two of the most powerful people in the nation. They have the power to make a difference in the gun violence epidemic. So far, they have done nothing. Today, we are calling on them to lead our community, state, and nation who want action. We're calling on the governor to call a special session to enact reasonable gun regulation in Wisconsin. We're calling on Speaker Ryan, one of the most powerful men in the nation and indeed on the planet, to act immediately, now that Congress is back in session, to enact reasonable gun regulation to keep our kids safe. We're calling on them to be true leaders, because true leaders serve their community, not the gun lobby. True leaders give a voice to their community and the people they represent. True leaders protect their community, especially the vulnerable, and especially a community's children. That's their job. Our community, state, and nation want them to act, and we want them to act now. We want them to enact reasonable gun laws that protect our kids and our communities. We want them to stop using mental illness as an excuse to do nothing about guns. We want them to stop sending their thoughts and prayers if they're not going to do anything to protect our children from the next shooting. To Governor Walker and Speaker Ryan, if you fail to lead on this issue, you have failed to protect our children. If you fail to lead, more innocent children will suffer. It's as simple as that. So don't fail us. Lead us. Show our kids that they are your priority. Enact reasonable gun laws and do it now. Our community, our state, and our nation are watching. The ball's in your court. Don't let us down. And by the way, this issue is not going away. We up here, this community, and people across the state are not going away. We're going to fight for our kids, whether they're with us, whether Governor Walker and Speaker Ryan are with us or not, because they're too important, and because that's what leaders do. I'd like to introduce now Madison School Superintendent Jen Cheatham.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the local leaders, teachers, and youth who are here today for your commitment and partnership I want to acknowledge board members James Howard, Nikki Vandermeulen, Anna Moffett, Kate Taves, Dean Loomis, and our student representative, Laura Nichols. As school leaders, we know that safety is always our top priority, and as such, we are continually seeking out ways to strengthen it and putting those strategies into action. We do this not just as educators who care deeply about students, but as parents and grandparents ourselves of children in our schools. I'll tell you, my heart goes out to my friend and colleague Bob Runcie, the superintendent in Broward County, Florida, his community, and the victims of the recent tragedy there. Bob was leading a celebration to honor their Teacher of the Year when he was notified that something terrible had happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Our students have the right to learn and thrive in an environment that nurtures their talents, their sense of belonging, and their joy without having to worry about the threat of a school shooting. Our teachers and principals have the right to thrive in their professions, hone their craft, building stronger relationships with students that push them to higher levels of learning without having to be continuously and increasingly trained on how to defend themselves and their students. Today we call on state and federal leaders to fight against the all too common access to firearms. We demand action because school safety is not a political issue. It is only about keeping our children safe. And at this point, I'd like to pass it over to Chris Taylor.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'm so very pleased to join Dane County Executive Joe Parisi and Jen Cheatham, our wonderful superintendent. They have been such leaders, and I'm so grateful for them. And I also want to recognize my incredible colleagues who are here, Representative Therese Berceau, Representative Melissa Sargent, and Representative Lisa Subek, who have just been absolutely stalwart advocates for our kids and for sensible, reasonable gun safety measures. So I am here to join this group of wonderful people behind me to call on our Republican leaders to act now, not to wait, to act now, to pass reasonable, common sense gun safety measures that frankly most of our state and most of the country supports. How many children have to be massacred before this governor and Speaker Robin Vos and Leader Scott Fitzgerald act? How many? How many more communities and families have to be devastated? How many more hearts have to be broken and young lives needlessly lost in order for these leaders to act? Last week, I stood with my Democratic colleagues, these wonderful colleagues behind me and many more, to call on Republican legislators. We were in the last week of our regular scheduled session in the State Assembly. It was one of the last chances that we're going to have to address the critical issues that are important in our state. And we called on them to act on 3 common sense gun safety measures, including background checks, a bump stock ban, and another bill about domestic violence, keeping firearms from abusers. And we got no response from them. We sent a letter, and I'm happy to provide that to you all. We got no response. So that same day, the Democrats in the State Assembly said enough is enough. We're going to try to get the background check bill, which is Representative Therese Berceau's bill that she has introduced many, many times. This is not a new debate. How many times?
6 years at least.
6 years she's introduced background check bill. We've had how many people killed? 33,000 people killed every year from guns. So you can do the math. And Speaker Vos spent literally hours in procedural machinations trying to stop this bill from coming to the Assembly floor, despite overwhelming support from all areas of our state. So we're here to say today we're not giving up. We are calling on this governor to use his power. He's scheduled 3 special sessions this legislative term. There is absolutely no reason he can't do so now on such a critical issue. So we're again calling on him and on our legislative leaders to act, and we are delivering a letter to the governor that we have passed out from many of my legislative colleagues. You know, there are mentally ill individuals all over this world and many other countries, and yet we don't see these massacres in other developed nations. We have our firearm homicide rate is more than 20 times the average of other developed countries. On average, 88 Americans are killed with guns each day. So the time to act, frankly, was a long time ago. Honestly, it really was. It's too late for the children of Sandy Hook and their devastated families, and it's too late for those 17 people who were killed in Parkland, Florida, which was an 8-school shooting where someone was injured or killed just this year. That should be unacceptable. That should be unacceptable to every single person. I believe it is to most people. It's not too late, though, for our kids that are playing in the playground right now or sitting in their classrooms right now, or these incredible students here. I just want to read their names off. Simon Keston, Julian Hamas, Ellis Kondrashov, Zane Jazensky, Ariel Haber-Fawcett, and of course our wonderful student representative, Laura Nichols, who is from West. The other students are from East. But I want you all, and I want these policymakers to look at these kids and look at their faces. And, you know, don't turn your backs on our children. Don't turn your backs on our children, because it's not too late for these students who are with us. So will you join us, Governor Walker? Will you be on the side of the people, or are you going to remain in the death grip of the NRA? There are no excuses. We have 10 months left in this year. We have plenty of time in the legislature to roll up our sleeves and get to work on passing common sense gun safety measures. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We will not rest. None of us in this room are going to rest until we do everything in our power to prevent dangerous individuals from getting access to guns. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful board chair, James Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Chris. As you stated, I'm James Howard, President of Madison Board of Education in Madison Metropolitan School District. I'd like to say that as local elected leaders, we've made school safety a top priority during all of the years that I have served on the Board of Education. Now that's because there's nothing more precious than the children we send to all of our schools each and every day. Now I've seen 3 of them through MMSD. I have 3 kids myself, with a senior who is slated to graduate from East High School this spring. So I'm well aware of what it's like to have kids in the school system. But schools cannot do it alone. We need our entire community to step up and demand that we do more, not only to protect ourselves, but to protect our children, but also limit the possibility that a school shooting will never happen again. Now, later tonight, the Board of Education will read a resolution in support of gun control that urges the legislature to act in support of all of our students. So, that's the most important message that we have here today, that we need the legislature to act. So I really want to thank County Executive Joe Parisi, Representative Chris Taylor, my fellow board members, and our students for being here today, united on this call for action. Thank you. Joe.
Thank you, President Howard. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
There have been a number of school safety incidents here in Madison and the surrounding communities since Parkland. Do you think local governments and districts are doing it?
We're doing everything we can on our end, but we can't do it alone. We need help from the state government, we need help from the federal government, and at this point, we're seeing no action on those levels. So we're here today to call on our leaders at the state level to act and act now. We're calling on our leaders at the federal level to act and act now, to do their part to make not only our schools, but our communities safer.
Superintendent speak to the district reviewing officers in the schools. There's an assembly bill that's passed with grants to school districts. So there's also, not just for you, but
Yeah,
can you also
maybe a
speak
board
to-
member, but go ahead, Matt.
Can you also speak to that issue of, that's not on your list of things for the special session, but, are you supportive of the effort to give grants to schools for, Army Guards to replace them?
I'll speak on funding for security. I mean, I do think as there are increasing demands on schools to keep them safe, the need for funding so that we can implement the strategies that align with best practice is incredibly important. And I think you'll hear from more superintendents speaking out on that particular issue now and in the near future. On education resource officers, I wonder if one of our board members might want to speak specifically to that issue. James, would you like to do that?
I don't know exactly what the question was, but we do have education resource officers in our schools. We are reviewing the practice, not reviewing whether we're going to have them or not, which is what's been spoken a lot in public. It's really not about whether or not we're going to have EROs in our school. It's about how do we improve their participation in our schools. So we have them in our schools, we support them, and we're looking forward to continuing the relationship.
Thanks, James.
Are educational resource officers armed currently or not armed?
Yes, they are.
Anyone speak to from the board about putting interior locks inside classrooms? That's going to be for discussion tonight, I believe. Do you think
I can speak to that.
Or-
Yeah. Go ahead, James.
You'd like to come up, you can. Kate, is your proposal, but
It's all good.
it's like we've stated before, we are looking at every practice we possibly can to improve the securities of our buildings and of our schools. If, in fact, adding interior locks to doors is a way of doing that, we are currently reviewing that practice, and we'll see if that's the way we'll go. But these things we're in the process of making those decisions, and but we are looking at putting interior locks on doors, yes.
You know, what we really want to see is on the prevention side and preventing dangerous people from getting access to guns. I think that is absolutely key. I don't know if a semi-automatic can shoot through a door lock. I'm sure they can. So I think it's important that obviously you all are having a very important discussion on we want our kids to be secure. I have 2 little kids too, sitting right now in their public school classrooms in Madison. But honestly, if we do not prevent dangerous people from getting access to guns, I don't think it necessarily matters what we do, what security measures we take. That is the key. That is the root of the problem that has got to be addressed in addition to these other things that we're talking about.
Yeah, we need a comprehensive approach. I mean, think of firefighting. The reason that we have so few catastrophic fires compared to 30, 40 years ago is because of their focus on prevention. Yes, we still are set for emergencies. We still have emergency rooms at hospitals, but medicine focuses on prevention. We can't have a comprehensive approach if we're leaving out the gun equation. It has to be part of our overall approach. It can't be off the table. So we need everyone to come together to address all of the issues that contribute to gun violence and that help keep us safer from the potential of it, but ultimately to prevent it in the first place.
Question for Representative Taylor or one of the other lawmakers. So 2 weeks ago at Mequon High School, the police pulled over 2 19-year-old men for an illegal U-turn and discovered that they had 3 loaded semi-automatic weapons in a duffel bag. And the owner of the guns said, well, I brought them with me in case I wanted to trade or sell them to someone. So there's your loophole in action. How do we address that sort of thing legislatively?
Do you want to talk about that, Drew?
But that is something that we have tried to do with my universal background check bill. Because right now, you can go to a gun show even, and you can buy a gun from somebody who isn't considered a retail dealer, and you aren't checked, and there's no age check as well. So, and a 14-year-old, as far as I know, who doesn't maybe look like a 14-year-old, could walk in and buy a gun and not be checked. Private sales through the newspaper. And I was in Walgreens one day, and I saw these kids about this tall, 2 little boys, who were looking at a magazine, and I was just kind of curious, and thinking maybe is there a dirty magazine on the shelf at Walgreens? What are they looking at? But, Playboy is gone now, or soon to be gone. They were looking at, it was a Guns and Ammo magazine. And in the back, so I went, when they left, I went and I looked, and sure, indeed, there are gun ads in the back. And you can see them in Madison newspapers any day. that there are so many ways. There are also something that may be ended is straw purchases, where people buy for people who can pass a background check, buy for others. Now, we did, the Republicans, in trying to get rid of our background check legislation last week, did substitute ending straw purchases, but I don't know if the governor's going to sign that. So, but, you know, people buying for others. And then there's guns that have been stolen that are traded on the streets. And there are just so many ways to get these guns. And they will say that criminals will always find the guns. Well, not if we start reducing the number of guns that are out there. Eventually, I mean, it's not something we're going to see overnight, but when it gets harder for a gun, it's going to be harder to, you know, find that AR-15 and go and shoot up a place. I mean, we know now it's happened in movies, it's happened in schools, it's happened at shopping malls. So it's at the point where we all know it could happen anywhere. But I think the most tragic thing to me is that we've had little kids lose their lives in the promise of what they could have been and done in their lives. And I think we all thought Newtown was going to solve that, there'd be some change, and we found out that our leadership in Washington is too callous. It's more important to have the NRA's support than to take care of our children. But there are lots of ways. My universal background check is trying to close those loopholes, saying that anybody who buys a gun, it has to go through the federal checking process. And we can't get them to give us a hearing. And it's been out, like I said, at least 6 years. It might be longer than that. They won't even give us a hearing on it to discuss it, and they fought it tooth and nail last Thursday or Tuesday. Tuesday night. They fought it for, what, 2.5 hours?
No, like 4 hours.
Or 4 hours.
4 hours.
4 hours, time flies when you're having a good time. 4 hours of every procedural maneuver they could find so that they wouldn't have to take a vote on background checks. They don't want to do it, they're not going to budge. So, did that answer your question?
Sure.
Oh, in a long way.
What about a 21-year-old age limit on certain categories of firearms? I mean, that may be a non-starter, but is it a good idea?
Well, I think that's, I think there are going to be a number of things they're going to do. If they move at all, it might be thinking that this age restriction is going to help. And I'm trying to remember the name of the shooter at Newtown, but his mom bought him the guns, as I recall. He did, and how old was he? Do you remember how old the Newtown shooter? He was like 14, I think, or something like that. Not that.
He was in the
No,
20s.
Oh, he was in his
Outside
20s. But they might have had those guns in the house, because I remember that it said that his mother had taken him to shooting ranges, so I don't know how long. And so he was obviously comfortable and trained as well. And that was from Mom. Mom going out and buying it because she knew that he liked shooting guns. So I don't know that an age restriction does much, if anything at all, when there are so many. If anybody wants an AR-15 in particular, and they know that they're going to, I mean, why are they buying it? They're not buying it to shoot a lot of deer, most likely. They can find somebody who's going to do that for them if they can't pass the background check. Even if they are 21 and could do it legally, if they don't think they're going to pass the background check. There's just too many illegal ways to get guns.
And I think the point we're trying to make here too is there are a lot of good pieces of legislation out there. There's a lot that can be done that's not even being debated.
Right.
Governor Walker is the states' rights governor, right? Every time he has anything to say, it's about states' rights. Give more power to the states. The states know better. They're closer to the people. Well, guess what? He has the power to make a difference. All of these bills could move through the legislature. They could be signed by the governor, but there's no action. We're here to demand action on reasonable gun reform, and we want it to happen now. And I would hope that every member of the media will go back to Governor Walker, will go back to Speaker Ryan and say, what's your plan? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to protect these kids? And how are you going to protect them in a comprehensive way? Not say, well, someday we have to address mental illness, therefore we're not going to do anything about guns. We want action. This community is not going away. We are here to stay. We're going to keep this issue alive. And we're not going to let it fade like it has in the past. So I hope you will demand answers from him. And with the governor, again, ask the states' rights governor why this should not be a state issue. Yes.
How do you plan on keeping it alive?
By any means necessary. The petition is standing up. We will continue to come to our friends in the media. Right
Here's
here.
the kids.
How can you
They're gonna
not?
keep it alive.
How can you not keep it alive with these kids? They're leading here, just like in Florida. It's their lives that are in danger, and we're the adults and we're not protecting them.
Do any of the students want to talk about the only measure that is alive right now that would put more armed guards in schools?
If you're comfortable.
If you're comfortable.
Only if you're comfortable.
Yeah, if they want to.
No, go ahead, Erin.
Okay.
Well, I think that having education resource officers in schools is a problem because it makes students feel very unsafe. And instead of doing that, we should be addressing the root cause of the problem, which is the actual allowing people to have guns in schools. So, yeah, that's what's more important to me.
I'll actually.
And they can stick around too, if you want to talk to them.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, I would actually have to disagree. I think that in light of what's happened not only nationally with the Parkland shooting, but also recent disciplinary issues in both La Follette and at West, actually, there was that same day or that same week, there were 2 fights that broke out with the same people. I think that it makes me feel safer. The students I've talked to, it makes them feel safer, and the teachers makes them feel safer. These are the people that have the tactical training to deal with arms in stressful situations, and the fact that we have those people armed in our schools is why the teachers who don't have that type of training shouldn't have arms in the schools. We need to have somebody there that knows what to do if a situation presents itself, and the issues around there being bias in the practices of these officers, that can be fixed with training, but this is absolutely the wrong time, I believe, to take them out of schools.
Joe, may I add something here? Since we're talking about, you guys are introducing this ERO conversation, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But for the person who asked the question, how many EROs in schools will make you happy and comfortable? How many do we have to put in? 1, 5, 10? Remember, schools aren't prisons. They're a place for kids to come to learn, to enjoy themselves, and to learn to be adults. It's not a place where you're supposed to come and there's armed guards all over the place. There's over 300 million guns circulating in American society. Over 300 million, more than 1 gun per person. How is that going to keep anyone safe? As Parisi said here, County Executive Parisi said, can we deal with the core issue here? The core issue is accessibility to guns and the lack of legislation to govern their use. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about EROs in schools. We really would rather not do that here today. But the question I would have for each one of you who want to talk about EROs is, how many do you want in each of our schools? And are you going to pay for it? Because they're not free. And schools have to make decisions on books and educating kids. So how many would make the public happy, those that are calling for more EROs in schools?
The Attorney General has suggested a discussion on arming teachers.
You know, I can, because the Attorney General came over to the legislature last Tuesday and seemed to be drafting legislation for my Republican colleagues. And the solution they came up with was more guns in schools. You know, what we want to focus on is research, data-driven solutions that we have a lot of research say work. Background checks, there's 20% of no questions asked gun purchases. No questions asked, 20% of gun sales. No questions asked. We know that background checks can work. We know that getting rid of these bump stocks can work. So we are really very focused on what is the research. We have data, we have incredible researchers who are looking at effective strategies to make it harder for dangerous people to get guns. That's what we're focusing on. We're focusing in the legislature on things that actually have been proven to help reduce the incidence of dangerous individuals get guns. So the only solution I hear from the Attorney General is let's arm everybody. And teachers, I have not heard a teacher say they want to be armed. They want to teach their children in a safe environment, and we need to do everything we can to make it safe. And that's what we're calling on this governor to act upon.
Going off that question, the issues on this petition, the background checks, the banning of bump stocks, how does that relate to the issues we've seen in this school district and surrounding school districts? So this.
It's a piece of it. It's a piece of the overall solution. You know, and when we get into these details, like what the Attorney General just recommended, my friend Congressman Pocan can't be here today because he's on a plane going to D.C. because they're going to be in session. But as you know, Mark is a magician, right? And if he were here, I think Mark would remind you that the way a magician gets you to not see what this hand is doing is he holds up a shiny object in this hand. He says, look here, don't look here. So please help us stay focused on the issue at hand, which is a comprehensive solution that addresses all of the issues that are important, because what we see from the folks who do not support reasonable gun laws time and again, in Mark's word, I quote my friend, look at the shiny object over here, and then they just wait for everyone to forget about the real issue. They wait for the next national issue to grab our attention, and nothing is done. We have to focus on a comprehensive approach that deals with all the pieces of this issue. And so far, what we're seeing from the majority party in the state of Wisconsin and from the ruling party nationally is a refusal to act on perhaps, and we believe, the most important piece of the comprehensive approach that's necessary.
The petition has 4 items, only 3 of which have bills attached to them. They represent the position so the assault weapon ban, is that just federal ban, what do you want?
There actually is legislation. Do you want me to take it? There
Sure.
is yeah, there is currently legislation at the state level that addresses the issue of assault weapons. It was introduced by Senator Lena Taylor and Representative Leon Young out of Milwaukee quite some time ago. Not sure if the petition addresses specifically that piece of legislation, but certainly there is legislation that could address that. Obviously, action on the federal level would be desirable as well.
Certainly not an either or. Any other questions?
I'm curious to know, what is the school district's response if students are to walk out of schools in support of gun reform?
I can take that one. Yeah, there has been talk about students wanting to have their voices heard. Our stance on that is consistent with the past. We want to ensure safe spaces and encourage students to stay in school and be able to discuss the topics at hand, the things that are important to them, and what's happening in our country and our world. And so we'll encourage them to stay in school and have those important discussions. If a student decides to join a demonstration, which would ask them to leave school, that's certainly a choice that they can make. Our policy is that students won't be excused by the school district. So parents, if you're listening, make sure that you're talking with your children if they choose to join in any such demonstration. This is a time that we need your partnership. But that's our stance. We want to keep kids in school, engage them in this important dialogue, and if they're going to leave school to be part of a demonstration, to do so safely.
So that might be a good point to sign off with a message to our children in this community that we're not going to forget about you, we're not going to give up, we're going to continue to fight for you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you.